I think we've got everybody showing up. And it looks like you can see me and hear me. In the chat there, you can toggle to be able to speak to just panelists, which is just me, or you can send it to panelists and all attendees. It would be great if you can switch that over to panelists and all attendees, because then everybody can know where you're coming from. So just to note that all of you are muted with camera off. As I said, we've got quite a crowd joining us today, and that's just a helpful tip there. But do use the chat to say hello. Let us know where you're coming from. I see Jemay has joined us from Nanaimo. That's great. Nancy's telling us that the power is out in Powell River. Go ahead and use the chat throughout the presentation just to be able to communicate with one another. But if you have a specific question for me, please do make sure that you're getting that into the Q&A module, because that's where I'll be looking for questions at the end of the event. I think we've got everything. Just the one note is that all the photographs from the presentation are not from me. I can't take a bird photograph to save my life. So they're all from All About Birds and the Macaulay Library. So just credit to those wonderful photographers. So let's get started. So we're going to start off talking a little bit about birding gear, what you need in order to get into birding. And then we're going to talk about navigating resources. What sort of resources are there out there? What do I recommend that you use? We're going to talk about identification hacks, ways to learn about how to identify birds. And then we're going to get to know how to know what birds you should be looking for, especially now when we're getting into bird migration. It's hard to know, well, who's migrating in April? Who's coming in May? What birds should I be looking for? Then we're going to talk about birding by ear. And this is something that a lot of people are interested in learning. And that's knowing how to identify a bird based on its call note and its song. Then I'm going to give all of you an identification challenge. So a group of 10 birds that I'm going to challenge you to go out and look for this spring and summer. You can find them all at the Botanical Garden. Just a little bit of a challenge to be able to find those birds. So we're going to talk about extreme birding, things you can do if you really want to get out there, and then we'll do Q&A at the end. And that's going to be, I think, the best part, because you'll find that other people's questions are probably the same as what your questions are. So first of all, birding gear. What do you need to succeed? And the answer is not much. Really, all you need is to be able to get outside or have a good window. And then a pair of binoculars is really going to help you out. And a good field guide is going to help you out as well. And I always recommend people have two sources of identification. And it can be website, app, hard copy book, but kind of two things to be able to look through. And we'll go through all that. So in terms of choosing binoculars, I've got two pairs with me here. One is a little pair like this, which I have on my desk in case anything comes by my office window. And then my regular birding binoculars. These ones are Pentax 10 by 36. But that means nothing, because it's just like the Ruby, you know, the perfect slipper sort of a thing, is that you need to try binoculars that are going to work for you. And the way that I suggest people do this is go somewhere where they sell a lot of different types of binoculars. On the Sunshine Coast, that's somewhere like London Drugs. Choose a sign in the distance and get a few pairs that are in your price range, and pick them up and look at that sign. And then decide which pair you're able to focus easily, which pair makes the sign look the clearest for you, and which ones you're able to as I said, focus easily. Because I've got really small hands, and so it makes a difference for me, the distance between where I'm grabbing the side of the binocular and where I'm focusing. And some of them, the focus wheel can be quite stiff. People like that. Some people like one that's looser. And so hold them up and see, okay, which sign which pair of binoculars is making that one sign look the same. So it's not going to really be apples to apples if you're looking all over the room. So just pick that one thing and go for that. And then one thing a lot of people don't know is that on the binocular, you've got your cap like this. And that's, if you're wearing glasses, you leave it down. If you're not wearing glasses, you lift it up, and then that gives you the distance between your eye and the lens in order to see clearly. When you're getting used to using binoculars, if you haven't used them before, or you haven't used them in a long time, don't try and focus when someone says, hey, there's a rare bird. Right? Like, find a pot in the garden and get your focus on that as quick as you can. You know, find a branch on a tree, get your focus on that as quick as you can, so that when you get used to bringing them up and focusing on them. And then the rule of thumb is to fix your gaze on what you're looking at, and then bring your binoculars up to meet that. So that's a little bit about that. And then if you start getting into wanting to look at gulls and Jaegers offshore or sandpipers or something like that, a telescope is going to become a handy piece as well. So then we get into choosing guidebooks. Guidebooks can be paper books, they can be websites, and they can be apps. And I'm going to do a little bit of show and tell here, just to show you a little bit about what guidebooks I prefer. So I always recommend that everybody have a standard field guide. And so these are two. This is National Geographic, Birds of North America, and this is Sibley Field Guide to Birds of Western North America. And I always recommend you have one of these. I started off with this one, and you can see it's been in the rain or a puddle or something, pretty well used. And in time, I've become more of a fan of the Sibleys. But what these guidebooks will do is they will tell you all the birds of North America, which can be a little bit overwhelming. But they'll give you the species and a range map here, and then good diagrams about what the birds will look like. And this is not something that I recommend you have, well, have it out in the field with you. But when you're first learning about birds, have it on the coffee table and pick it up on a Saturday afternoon and look through it and just go, oh, okay, those are what flycatchers look like. Cool. The cat says hello. And okay, these are jays. These are what jays look like. And start to get to know the different varieties of birds, finches versus warblers versus sparrows, that sort of thing. If you're more photography based, and some people are, they're just more comfortable with photographs in their guidebooks. A good one is this little one here. It's Birds of Southwestern British Columbia by Cannings, Aversa, and Opperman. I'm hoping they fixed their binding issues in the last 10 years since I bought this one, but it'll have a nice single photograph of the bird, as well as a description of what birds they're similar to, what sort of habitat you should find them in. A more comprehensive photograph-based book is the Smithsonian Guide to Field Guide to Birds. And it will have multiple photographs of each species, showing what it looks like from various different angles. When you start going a little nuts over the whole bird thing, Peterson has a lot of really great guides. So this one's about warblers. You can get ones about what bird nests look like, that sort of thing. And it will start giving you more and more detail. And then if you start getting into hawks and shorebirds and stuff like gulls, things like that, then there are a whole host of dedicated books for those. One book that I do recommend you find is Bird Finding in British Columbia. And this is by my friend Russ Cannings and his father, Dick Cannings, who's a well-known naturalist. Excuse me, one moment, please. There you go, sweetie. And so what this does is it goes through British Columbia region by region, including the Sunshine Coast, and it breaks down where the hottest birding spots are. And so if you're planning a road trip, when we can do these things again, this is really going to be an essential book, and that's Bird Finding in British Columbia by Russell Cannings. And that's what I've got there. I'm going to go back to the screen share, and then we'll talk a little bit more about resources here. And then let's talk about apps, because we all like apps. I love them too, having all the birds in your phone. And so this is my main app stack for birding. I have Sibley Birds. Now that's a paid app, and it's not cheap. I think it's about $30, but it gives me my Sibley's field guide in my hand on my phone everywhere I go. And it's got a lot of detail in terms of the drawings that are in there, the range maps, and it has a good database of calls and songs as well. Then I also have eBird that we're going to get into today, and that's what I use for reporting my sightings and keeping a log of what I've seen, and also contributing as a citizen scientist. And then there's the Merlin Bird ID app, which is what you can use to ID birds that you've seen, that you have a visual of them. And we will walk through that today as well. That one's free. eBird is free as well. And then BirdNet. BirdNet is new to me. I just tested it out yesterday morning, and it's a really exciting app. And that's one you can use for identifying birds by their sound, so by their call or their song. And that's also free. Lastly, there's Seek by iNaturalist. iNaturalist is an incredible database. We're not going to get into it today, maybe another time. But if you find a butterfly and you don't know what it is, then you can load that into iNaturalist and the algorithm will help you identify it. And if the algorithm can't, then another member of the community will help you identify your butterfly, or an ant, or a deer, and you want to know what species of deer it is, or a tree, or a bush, or a bird. So iNaturalist is a really powerful resource. And then lastly, Audubon has a nice app that if you're finding the Merlin and the BirdNet are not working for you, it's just not your vibe, try Audubon, because I found its identification, it communicates in a different way, but we all communicate in different ways. So if Merlin's not doing it for you, check out Audubon. So let's talk about Merlin first. So Merlin is an app that you have on your phone. You've seen a bird and you want to know, well, what bird is this? I don't know what it is. So you log into Merlin and it's going to ask you where you saw the bird. And you can look that up on a map. You can say my current location, or you can search for a location. And then it's going to ask you when you saw the bird, because what it's doing is it's going to bring up a different database for Seashelt in March than it will for Seashelt in August. And then it's going to ask you, well, what size was the bird? And so this was a group of birds that I saw at the Botanical Garden. And if you want to put into the chat your guess of what bird this is, please go ahead and do that. That might be a little fun. So it's about a robin-sized bird that was gray and orange. And there were a group of them, robin-sized, gray and orange, and they were in some trees. And so I went ahead and I put this into Merlin. Nobody's going to guess. Okay, fine. And it comes back with saying, there we go. We've got a few people putting their guesses in there. Those are great guesses. Varied thrush, one for spotted towhee. That's a good one as well. So it was varied thrush that I saw. But what Merlin does is it says, hey, based on what you've told me on the size of the bird and the coloring of the bird, I think these are the options of what it was. And so varied thrush were the ones that I saw. And I'll show you actually the trail that I saw them on. It's a great little birding trail at the garden. But Merlin also says, okay, it could have been American robin, or it could have been an American kestrel. American kestrel is one of our falcons. It's this very petite little bird. They hover when they're hunting, which is, I think they're the only bird species that I know of besides a hummingbird that can hover. If you're on the Sunshine Coast and you want to see a kestrel up in the shores at Heritage and Sandpiper, or Heritage and, oh, I forget the other street there, just a little bit west, good place to see a kestrel. So that's the Merlin app. The other one is BirdNet. So this was the one I tried out yesterday morning. So I was just sitting on my patio listening to the morning birds. It was, you can see about 8:30 there. It wasn't that super early in the morning. But what BirdNet does is it listens to what's around you. This was just kind of the base hum of being outdoors. But then it picks up various different little, I don't know the terminology for it, but the sound comes up as different shapes in different spaces on the screen here. And then you select which part of the image you want it to analyze, and you say analyze. And so I found the American robins, they're singing trilly, trilla, trilly, trilla, trilly, trilla, and they come into this part of the image here. And so when I hit analyze, it said, yes, it was the American robin. The thing that I like about this is that it will tell you if it's certain, uncertain, or making a real big guess. Because for me, I know that's the American robin, right? And so I trilly, trilla, trilly, trilla, it says American robin, I'm good. But when you're learning, you might not know. So keep an eye on that. If it says it's super certain, then you can probably rely on that. If it says it's super uncertain, you might want to try it against another resource about what the sounds are. And we'll get into those too. But as I started playing around with this, there's the robin, trilly, trilla, trilly, trilla, trilly, trilla. And then a group of pine siskins came by. They've got kind of a buzzy, harsh note to them. And that was this, this vocalization showing up here. And then dark-eyed junco was doing a trill. Those are these ones here. And so when you analyze it for each section, it will tell you what it's hearing, all the birds in that section. So this one, for example, there was the common raven, rourke, rourke, that's this here. And then there was a fox sparrow making a little chipping call note here. So that's BirdNet, which I think is a massively fun, and you could go a little bit insane with it. The birds do need to be right quite near to you and quite loud. For example, I heard Steller's jays, a red-breasted nuthatch in the distance. It wasn't able to pick those up. But if you're right under the bird or right next to the bird, great resource to be able to figure that out. So try BirdNet. And you will be getting an email tomorrow with some references to these sorts of things as well. So, oh, again, so this was the spotted towhee. I thought this was very interesting how it showed up in the, I wish I knew the word for what these were called, but very, very interesting. And even here, the violet green swallow, they've got a very light contact call. I'll bring it up for you now so you can hear it. So I'm hoping you can hear that. But those are the contact calls for the violet green swallow. And so that was this chip, chip, chip right in here. And violet green swallows are just migrating in right now. So my first ones that I heard were yesterday. And I didn't see any, but because I'm able to bird by ear, I was able to know that they were there, and BirdNet helped me prove it. So the other one I love is eBird. And so this is for reporting sightings. And so all of this information goes to the Cornell lab for avian research. And so whenever you put your sighting in, you're acting as citizen scientists. And so researchers can go in there and they're researching violet green swallow or what have you, and they don't know how quickly or how far they're migrating. They're able to look into this database of millions of birders who are out there reporting their sightings and get that information. And us as bird watchers, we're able to do that as well. Sonograms. Thank you, Jack. Sonograms is the name of those sound pictures, sonograms. So I put into eBird the date that I'm birding, the time that I'm starting. You can do the checklist as you go if you want. And then it gives you a list of species that are likely. So this is likely species based on 273 checklists in a 20 by 20 kilometer area. This is a lot of birds. So interesting to look through if you're kind of wondering what's there, but it's still a lot of birds. So what I do is I start to search. Violet green swallow, it gives me the violet green swallow, and I'm able to put in my checklist of what I've seen. So not only is this useful from a citizen scientist thing, it's a nice way to share with my fellow birders on the Sunshine Coast, and it's also kind of nice for me to have a database of what I've seen and when I saw my first Rufous hummingbird of the year, the previous year, things like that. And we will hop into eBird in a minute as well. eBird will also show you things like hotspots if you want to know what birding areas are around you. If you get really into your listing, it will tell you what your target species are. So species that I haven't seen on the Sunshine Coast before, where other people are going birding, what they're seeing. So that's just in the app. So then let's get into navigating resources. So one of the big things I was talking about with having your field guide and regularly looking through your field guide like a reference book, not when you need it, but just like, oh, okay, these are what gulls look like. These are what sandpipers look like, that sort of thing, is getting to know the various types of birds we have in our region. And so this is not a complete list, but it gives you a bit of an idea. Swans, geese, ducks. What are the differences between swans and geese? What are the differences between the various different ducks? What's the difference between a loon and a grebe? And then it starts to get more difficult when we're thinking, well, what are the difference between finches and sparrows? They can both kind of be LBJs, little brown jobs, right? Flycatchers and vireos. And so you're sitting there and you're thinking, well, that's why I'm here, Alexis. What is the difference between all these things? And so a quick overview of that is geese and swans. They're big, they've got long necks. They tend to be fairly distinct from one another, and they're a good winter project, particularly ducks. So if you're getting into birding and you find the summer a little overwhelming because they're all little and fast moving, get back into it in October when ducks are going to be off Davis Bay here in Sechelt. They're bigger, they tend to sit still, and you can get your binoculars on them, and they're pretty distinct. Loons and grebes, the length of the neck, the size of the bill, what the markings on them are. Finches, they tend to be in trees. They tend to be in groups. They can both be drab and colorful. So the purple finch, the female, brown stripy thing. You don't think much of it, but the male is bright, bright red, reddy purple kind of a color. Towhees and sparrows, they tend to be on the ground. They're what I call scratchers, are commonly referred to as LBJs, little brown jobs. Dicky birds, those are probably going to be sparrows for you. Warblers. Warblers are just arriving now. Yellow-rumped warblers are the first to come. They're seasonal, they're colorful, they're often in deciduous trees, and they're flitting around. They're moving pretty fast. Robins and thrushes, they're a larger bird. You know, they're not the little dicky birds. They're not big like a gull or a hawk. They're in between, and we've got three main species of them: the robin, the varied thrush, and the Swainson's thrush. We'll talk about the Swainson's thrush later on. That's a lovely bird. Flycatchers. Really hard to ID by sight. Very distinctive by sound, though. And their movement is very distinctive. They're not going to have as much of the flitting like a warbler. They're going to have what's called a hawking behavior. So they're going to land on a branch and they're going to fly catch. They're going to hawk out, they're going to get their fly, and they're going to come back. And then they're going to hawk out and they're going to come back. So when you start to learn the distinctive ways of sparrows versus finches versus flycatchers, it makes it easier to look them up in your guidebook. Vireos have a very distinctive song: question and answer, question and answer. Some of them are more insistent about it, like a Hutton's vireo. Some of them ask you, some of them will ask other, it seems like they're asking someone else and then someone else is answering. Hummingbirds, of course, we have our two main species on the Sunshine Coast. We've got beautiful Anna's hummingbird and then the rufous hummingbird, which is just migrating in now. We've had a couple reports on the coast. Eagles versus hawks, you're really looking a lot at the wing patterning from underneath and how they're moving in the air. And we'll get into that in detail in a minute about how they're moving in the air. That's really distinctive. Sandpipers and gulls are kind of the masterclass situation. Sandpipers, when they're flying up into the Arctic in April, they will look very different than when they're coming home end of June and into July, because their plumage in April is very fresh, very bright, very distinctive. It won't be later in the year. And so it's understanding those seasonal, even from a few month changes, make a big difference. Gulls, people tend to think, oh, there's seagulls and that's it. But there's actually a huge variety of different sorts of gulls. We have 6 main species on the coast. They vary depending on age. Some have 4-year maturity cycle, some have a 3-year maturity cycle, and they have a bit of interbreeding. But when you can get down the main ones, then it gets more interesting and you're more comfortable to be able to look at them. But the big thing with gulls is light ones and dark ones. If you're looking for a rare seagull, it's either going to be your light one or it's going to be a dark one. So some identification hacks. Just 1 second. My screen is frozen, but we can still hear me. Has my screen changed? I got a note from the boss there. You can put into the chat, everybody, can you see a screen that says narrowing it down? Kimberly says still okay. It's changed. Awesome, thank you. It seems like everybody can see that the screen has changed except Mary, but thanks for the heads up. So narrowing it down about what bird you're looking at. So I've got the boss in my phone here via text message, so I do need to check in with her, make sure everything's okay. No, yes, okay, that's enough of that. All right, so narrowing it down, what sorts of birds are we looking at? And also, what sorts of birds should we be looking for? And so it's going to be dependent on habitat. So depending on if you're even on ocean versus fresh water, if you're around a marsh versus in a deep forest, if you're up a mountain versus at the shoreline or in your back garden, it's all going to be varying different habitats. So if I'm bird watching down at Sargent Bay, I've got a different mental list of which birds I'm expecting to see and hear than if I'm in Kinnickinnic Park or if I'm at the Botanical Garden. And then wonder about the location of in the habitat. So is it a scratcher on the ground? Are they at eye level? Are they soaring up above? And then general impression of size and shape. So the general impression of size and shape is just what it sounds like. Did it look kind of like a robin? Did it look like a A seagull, but it wasn't quite a seagull? Or was it like an eagle, but it was smaller? So what is your general impression of the size and shape of that bird? And then also movement. So is the bird flitting? Is it scratching on the ground? Is it spiraling up a tree? Is it spiraling down the tree? We've got different birds depending if they're spiraling up or if they're spiraling down. And then their flight. And so if you're like at the garden and you're on the main events lawn there, great place to look up and see eagles, hawks, vultures, that sort of thing. And when you look up, an eagle will, obviously it's very large, but it's got very, very stable flight. Its wings are outstretched. It might tip to the left, it might tip to the right, but it's got a very, very stable flight movement. It doesn't flap its wings a lot either. Whereas a hawk, so a sharp-shinned hawk or a Cooper's hawk, they're going to be smaller, obviously, but they're going to have more of a rounded wing, a longer tail. But those hawks have very distinctive flap, flap, glide sort of movement. So they will flap, 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 glide for a few minutes. Flap, 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 glide. Vulture, we have the turkey vulture on the Sunshine Coast and within British Columbia. They have, they're migrating in now. They'll be here for the summer. Very distinctive V shape to their wing position when they're flying, and they're very tippy. So they're going to be tipping to the left, tipping to the right, tipping to the left, tipping to the right. Very, very tippy in flight. You're not going to see them flapping a lot. You're just going to see that tippy back and forth kind of movement. Falcons are small. They've got very short wings. And if an eagle is a cargo carrier, a falcon is a fighter jet. Very, very fast moving. And woodpeckers, consistently, if it's a downy woodpecker, a northern flicker, a great big pileated, they've got a dipping flight to them. So they've got a dipping flight up and down. So that when you're starting to look at things around you, these differences of habitat, their general impression of size and shape, and their movement and their flight will help you narrow down what sort of a bird you're looking at. And how do I know what to look for? That's huge. How do you know what to look for? And so this is when we get into eBird and all about birds. And so I'm going to when we change these things, that's always when things get dangerous, right? Okay. All about birds. Here's eBird. So ebird.org, and that link will get mailed around to you tomorrow. But what I want to bring to your attention with eBird, so this is where I'm reporting my sightings. But if you don't want to report your sightings, you can just explore. And so I'm going to go to explore here, and then I'm going to go to Sunshine Coast. That's bringing up British Columbia. And there's a recording of this that'll go around. So if you're thinking you're not remembering everything, that's okay. It'll come up again in the video that you can watch. So these are all the last time these birds were reported. So last time somebody reported a red-tailed hawk, that was me yesterday. I saw one when I was driving up in Half Moon Bay. And as hummingbird, Rand was the last one to report it there. But what's really interesting is all these sightings go into a massive database. So if we go to the left-hand side here to bar chart, this is one of the most valuable resources you can have if you want to learn about birds. So if you're not on the Sunshine Coast, obviously search your region where you do live. And then same thing, look for that bar chart. And this will tell me the species of the bird and its abundance by month, even down to week. So we can see for the snow goose on the Sunshine Coast, it's most abundant in the 2nd and the 3rd week of April, and then again in the 3rd week of October. And that's when they're migrating over us from the Arctic down to southern, south of here, even outside the Vancouver region. So if I'm sitting here and it's the end of March, and I'm thinking, okay, I want to learn more about my local birds. April's coming up. Who's coming in? Who's going to be showing up? And so I can look through April here and find out who's going to be showing up. And this, I would even break it down April versus May. So blue-winged teal, it's showing up in May. I don't need to worry about it. But I'm going to go down to the little flitty birds. Sandpipers, we want to skip those. Here we go, flycatchers, that'll do. So flycatchers, most of them are going to be showing up in May, but the Hammond's flycatcher, it's going to show up at the end of April. So then I can know, I can look in my field book and say, hey, what does a Hammond flycatcher look like? Oh, right, Alexis said they're ridiculous to identify by eye. So what does it sound like? Same thing with Pacific slope flycatcher. Or we come into the vireo. So Cassin's vireo. Cassin's vireo is going to be showing up. Start looking into what a Cassin's vireo looks like. What's its habitat like? What's its call like? What's its song like? Those sorts of things. So this does need to be taken with a bit of a grain of salt. Like any resource, it can be a little bit, it needs to be, as I said, there are 2 reference points for things. So the reason why I say this is that for hummingbirds, we've got the Anna's hummingbird all year round. Makes sense. Costas hummingbird, there's a chance you can see them in May and July. Rufus hummingbird migrates in March, here with us in the summer, then migrates back down to Mexico. Makes sense. Calliope hummingbird, bit of a chance of seeing it here. Then eBird says you've got a chance of seeing a Xanthusis hummingbird pretty much all year round. And I'm going to tell you, you don't. So this Xanthusis hummingbird was one bird that was on the Sunshine Coast in Gibson's in, I think, the early 90s. It should have been in the Baja Peninsula in Mexico, but it got lost and it showed up in Gibson's. And so we won't be seeing this bird again on the Sunshine Coast or pretty much anywhere else in North America. People literally flew around the world to see this bird in Gibson's. So with any of these things, most of it's going to be pretty straightforward. Just don't get your hopes up for that Xanthusis. And then you can do a lot of other things with eBird in here. If you want to look at the hotspot maps, again, I mentioned the fact that that's in the app as well, but you can come in here and you can see, well, in Sechelt on the Sunshine Coast, where are there hotspots? And so the different colors based on the abundance of different birds that have been seen there. Mission Point and Wilson Creek, very hot spots for birds on the Sunshine Coast. We can see the Botanical Garden here. Very good for birds as well. Not as many people birding there though, but you can go and see that there have been 79 species recorded. I'd love to see that over 100 this year. I'm going to do my part. Hope you'll help out. And then you can see what those species have been. So lots you can do with eBird. Okay. The other one is All About Birds. So All About Birds is where you can research them. So let's do violet green swallow. You think, hey, I've got my guidebook. I want to learn about violet green swallow. Come into All About Birds and it will show you photos of it. It'll let you listen. Then you can also look into ID info about what birds you might compare it to. You might get it confused with those sorts of things. Their life history, their maps, tons of information about being able to look up more detail about these birds. So you don't need to go spend money to buy a book or spend money on an app. You can use All About Birds and learn a lot from that. Okay, I think it's time to get back into our slideshow. So that's how we can learn more. Learning to bird by ear. This can be very challenging. So even if you know most of your birds by sight, being able to learn them by ear can be difficult. And so I asked local birders, what are you doing about this? What are your recommendations? One of the top recommendations was you hear the bird and you track it down. And that's not always possible. Can be confusing and difficult to do, but if you can get that visual input of seeing the bird actually singing, it'll help it stick in your head a lot more. Next one is to get your backyard birds locked down. So if you know what birds are in your garden right now, then when migration starts coming and there are those new sounds, you're going to know, okay, that's a yellow-rumped warbler, not a song sparrow, which is with us all throughout the year. And then relating it to habitat. So again, if you know that if you're by marshland and you hear a different song, that's going to be, maybe that's a common yellowthroat or a yellow warbler that are more likely in those marshland sorts of areas. And knowing a call note versus a song can help as well. So a song usually longer, usually what we think more of as bird song, whereas a call note is just that one quick little, that sort of a thing. But you can also identify birds on that as well. The style of the song. So vireos, I mentioned they have that kind of that question and answer thing. Robins, black-headed grosbeak, and western tanager all have a similar melodious, very kind of a sing-songy sort of a song. Robin, I would say, was kind of the straight version of that, straightforward version of that. Black-headed grosbeak, a little looser, a little bit like it's maybe had a cocktail, it's just going on a little longer. And the western tanager has kind of a harsh kind of prick, prick note at the end. So getting to know those sorts of styles. And accents vary. So if you're moving here from somewhere else, the songs aren't all going to sound the same. So a white-crowned sparrow, for example, it will sound different on the Sunshine Coast or in BC than it will up in the Yukon. I even think the accenting is different between Sunshine Coast and Tofino for white-crowned sparrow. And then also keeping in mind varying different sorts of call notes. So I have American goldfinches that visit my garden. They have a call note when they arrive. So their song is a very, it's kind of the canary of North America. It's very kind of Tweety bird sort of a song, quite distinctive when you get to know it. But their call notes vary. So when they show up, they've got one call note. When they're finding a mate, they've got different call notes back and forth. When they're teaching their young to feed, they've got a different call note for that. When they're giving them flying lessons, they've got a different call note for that. So see if you can start to unwind that, start to figure that out. And then it really comes down to hours in the field. Hard work, all that sort of thing. But I do have one little hack that nobody else suggested for birding by ear. And that is a CD. And it's a CD by a man named John Neville. He's a birder. He lives on Salt Spring Island, I believe. And the album is called Bird Songs of Canada's West Coast. If you're an Apple Music subscriber, then it's included in that. You can buy it in the iTunes store as well. You can get a CD of it from your bookstore. I know local bookstores have carried it in the past, or you can download it directly from Neville Recording. So what this is it's an album and it's John's recordings, and he will say the species, where he took the recording, what the habitat was like, and then you get to listen to the bird's song. And there are other albums out there, but they'll just say least flycatcher, greater flycatcher, Pacific Slope flycatcher, and then the song. Whereas this is something that I really find it's enjoyable to listen to. And so what I will do is I'll turn it on a Sunday morning when I'm just puttering around the house and listen to John Neville's Bird Songs of Canada's West Coast. And then when I start to get really granular about it, I'll make a playlist. And so I'll know, okay, I've got song sparrow down, I've got towhee down, I've got raven down. I know I want to focus in on maybe these 6 different species. And then again, I'll listen to that, have it going in the car, that sort of thing. So that's my one big hack for birding by ear. The next one is our bird identification challenge. No, we do not have toucans on the Sunshine Coast, but what we're going to do now is we're going to walk through some birds that you can find at the Sunshine Coast Botanical Garden, anywhere in the Georgia Basin. Around the Salish Sea, you'll be able to find these birds, and talk a little bit about where to find them, how to find them. So these ones are going to be from at the Botanical Garden. So one little, actually these, paper birches, I think, maybe, not sure. Anyway, these trees here, next time you're at the garden, take a look at them and you'll see the lines from red-breasted sapsuckers making marks on them. So take a look for those. So our first bird for the challenge is the song sparrow. This is a little dicky bird, little brown job. Song sparrows are abundant. They're with us all year round. They tend to get a little bit ignored, but if you're new to birding, even if you're kind of getting into it a bit more, get to know your song sparrow. They can be variant. They do have subspecies to them, so they can look a little bit different. And sparrows, to be honest, they can be tough because they're little brown stripy guys. And a song sparrow versus a white-throated sparrow versus a vesper sparrow, all those sorts of things. That's a good one to know. And the next one, if you don't know them already, is the spotted towhee. Spotted towhee is a very striking bird. I find when people first see it for the first time, they think it's something tropical from another place, very distinctive with its dark back and its rufous sides and the white underbelly. It can get confused with a robin, which is understandable, but it's got that very distinctive red eye. This is also on the ground. This is also a scratcher. And the white-crowned sparrow. These are one of my favorite little birds. These ones are also migrating in as well, just showing up now into the next few weeks. They will show up in droves. Once you spot them and you know them, you'll see them everywhere. If you're a gardener as well, they'll follow you through the garden looking at the upturned soil. This is the one that has the distinctive song that varies regionality, very strongly varies regionality. So all of these birds can be found in the rhododendron garden at the Botanical Garden. Wonderful place where you've got these open bits where they can get in there and scratch for bugs, turn leaves over looking for bugs. And they're fairly easy to see in this sort of an environment because it's not too dense. It's also just plain pretty. The next one I want you to try looking for, if you haven't found them already, is the yellow-rumped warbler. This is an abundant warbler. There are many, many, many of them. They're showing up in the last few weeks. They will show up in droves in the next couple weeks. They have two subspecies. The myrtle, which you can see here, more of a speckle on the back and that white throat. And then the Audubon, which is a more uniform gray on the back and the yellow throat. They've got a very distinctive thup, thup, thup kind of call note that once you learn that, it's very, very recognizable when they show up. These are the sorts of birds that will show up in what we refer to as fallout. So a fallout is during spring migration. If the weather's nice and all the birds will lift up and they'll start their migration north, and then maybe a day like we had today will come along with heavy winds, high rain, and they'll literally get knocked out of the sky. And then you'll go to the garden or wherever you're going for your morning walk, and there will be little birds everywhere. And so that's spring migration fallout. These guys, warblers, love walls. And so around the native plant garden there, where you've got walls on three sides and walls of trees, of those deciduous trees, the alders and what have you, there's a wonderful place for the yellow-rumped warbler to be found. Also here by the pond, and you've got, the plants that look like hot dogs on sticks. Someone put in the chat what those are. But the marshland plants that look like hot dogs on sticks, bulrushes. Thanks, Janet. You're the best. So bulrushes, these marshy areas, that's where you're going to want to be able to look for common yellowthroat, very distinctive, masked, yellow head, black mask on its head, very distinctive witchity, 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 witch call, and the yellow warbler that we'll look at later as well. But because we have so many yellow-rumped warblers coming our way, take a look for them in these sorts of walled areas. Swainson's thrush. Swainson's thrush is a thrush about the size of a robin. Not much to look at, very kind of plain brown background, speckled chest, and I'll tell you right now, hard to see. They won't show up until kind of third week of May. They're one of our last migrants to come up. The reason why I mention these guys though is their song. And I'm just going to bring that up now. Swainson's thrush. It's a very, very distinctive song, which is described as an upward spiral. So while you won't easily see a Swainson's thrush, they're very easy to hear, and it's a very, very distinctive song. And the best place that I love to enjoy them at the Botanical Garden is at the viewing platform. This lovely, lush, cool in the summer environment. And I was there last July, like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and they were singing everywhere all around me, which is really, really wonderful. So they're not going to be there for a few weeks, but when you're at the viewing platform, I recommend you take a listen for the Pacific wren. The Pacific wren is one of our tiniest birds, but it's got a great big voice. And I'm just looking that one up as well. The Pacific wren was formerly called the winter wren until that got split down the Rockies based on geography. But the Pacific wren is calling now. I was up at the garden on Monday and it was singing, singing, singing away. It's actually interesting. In the back of that, we heard the Swainson's thrush as well. But the Pacific wren is very fast, very high pitched. I'm ready to go, kind of a thing. And you'll hear those now if you're at the viewing platform. Another birds to look for there, we talked about spiraling up versus spiraling down. And so the brown creeper will spiral up a tree and the red-breasted nuthatch will spiral down a tree. And so environments like this are also great ones to look out for those two birds. This is my new favorite trail, new to me favorite trail at the Botanical Garden. And so you've got the oaks on the left and I think this is the Acer maples on the right. And then a trail and it goes east-west. And so I went down this one on Monday and I was so pleased with how exciting this is going to be this coming spring. And so this is where I was listening to Hutton's Vireo was singing on Monday. And Hutton's Vireo is an all-year bird for us and it's got a Zuweet song. So if vireos have that question and answer kind of theme to them, Hutton's Vireo is just question, 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 question. But this is where all those varied thrush were, a great group of varied thrush. And this is going to be really exciting when it leafs out in the coming weeks for more warblers, flycatchers, more vireos, that sort of thing. The next one I want you to look for, if you don't already know them, are violet green swallows. They're, as I said, also migrating in. We took a listen to their contact calls earlier. Violet green swallows are very distinctive. They've got almost that kind of G formation here. This is the start of a G. That's how you remember a bit of the identification on this one. Because its friend, the tree swallow, looks very, very similar. So violet green swallow, again, we've got that bit of the G. It's got this white banding at the tail, whereas the tree swallow doesn't have the white banding, just a little bit on the side of the rump and a kind of a straight line across. Tree swallow being kind of overall greenish, bluish to it. Violet green, literally violet and green. They're the same size. They're both cavity nesters, but they will take to a bird box. And they will be seen along with American goldfinches. Now we mentioned these guys and their song being like the canary of the north. Trying to find them. Goldfinch. So that's the goldfinch, and they're very, very chatty. They love to be around the vegetable garden and the works yard, the swallows as well. So we're thinking open sky area. I know Harry Hill said at our last session, Gardening for Wildlife, which is on our YouTube channel if you missed that one. He said that the goldfinches love to come in for the sunflowers once they start to seed up. There are nesting boxes for the swallows. There's one here, there's one there. I know they have been used in the past. So take a look for the violet green and tree swallows. They're just starting to migrate in now. The next one is the turkey vulture. We talked about the very distinctive V shape of its wing when it's in flight, that distinctive V. They've also got distinctive patterning underneath them. The red of the head can be difficult to see. This one's black because this is an immature, this is a young bird. But the under patterning of the wings is very distinctive and they're known to kind of hang their wings out to heat themselves up and dry themselves off. But you'll be able to see those ones again at the garden where you've got big sky areas. So often when I'm in this area of the garden, there is the bald eagles, the hawks, and the vultures coming through looking for something to eat. This one is a challenge. And so this one you might not be able to find at the Botanical Garden just because of the timing of when it's flying. And so this is the common nighthawk. So common nighthawk comes in later in the year. Think kind of June. I always associate these birds with July and August. And the reason for that is like, think you've had gorgeous August day, you're out on the deck or in the back garden, you've got your gin and tonic in hand, it's like an hour before dark, you're just tipping your head back. That's when I want you to look for the common nighthawks. You might be, if you're seeing them, you might just be thinking they're a seagull, but they're more slender, they're quicker moving, they're faster, and they've got a very distinctive call. We're going to listen to that one now. So they've got that very distinctive, it's almost a quack-like call. So I think if people, you might hear that and you might think, wow, that duck sounds sick, but it's not, it's a common nighthawk. So keep that one in mind at the end of the day. And that booming noise is when they catapult themselves down, and it's the sound of the air moving through their feathers. That's kind of a mating call sort of a thing for them. But the common nighthawk is a really, really interesting bird. It nests on mossy bluffs, areas like that. They are a species of concern. So there's research being done into how to help them and protect them. And I hope that kind of gave you a bit of an idea of different varieties of birds that we can see, and kind of sparked you into being interested in looking at different ones. One thing I often hear from people is they say, I saw a yellow bird. And they're so excited and they're like, it must be an escapee. And I'm just like, well, where did you see it? Which yellow bird was it? Because we've got a lot of different types of yellow birds, and this isn't even exhaustive. And these are all common birds, spring and summer on the Sunshine Coast. So the American goldfinch that we spoke about, Wilson's warbler, orange-crowned warbler, it's more of a greenish tone to it. You don't always see its orange crown, just kind of when it's annoyed, it'll show up. And the yellow warbler around kind of marshy areas. Common yellow throat, also very yellow. There are a lot of different varieties of birds out there. So this I call the progression of insanity. And so this is, you start out being a bird watcher. Maybe you've got a feeder in the backyard and you're just kind of watching the birds that are there and thinking, well, that's kind of interesting. And then you turn into a birder. A birder is a verb. So a birder will go looking for birds. The birder will go to the Sechelt Marsh because they want to see specific birds that are there, or to see what birds are there, or that sort of thing. The birder then transforms into a lister. So the lister is keeping a list of birds that they have seen for a geographical area, or for a year, or within their lifetime, or what have you. A lister can go to a twitcher, and I've got twitcher in brackets because being called a twitcher is not necessarily a compliment. A twitcher, they want to see only the rare bird, and they want to see it first, and they might not be that good about telling other people that it's there, but they just want to get that one new bird onto their list. Then you can do things like a big sit. A big sit is when you go to one spot, maybe the botanical garden, and you sit there and you see and listen to what you can find in that one particular spot. One of my favorite ways of learning the local birds was to do a little sit in my own garden. So I would just put a blanket out on the lawn, take my bird books out there with me, take a notebook, and listen to what was going on around me, see what was going on around me in order to identify what birds were around me. So a big or little sit is a fun thing to do. A big day is when you wake up before dawn and you bird until dusk. And so you're trying to see as many birds as you possibly can within a geographical region. Me and some friends have the big day record for the Sunshine Coast for February, which is a bit of an obscure thing, but we had a heck of a fun day. And then a big year is when you do that all year round. So you want to see as many birds as you can within one calendar year within a geographical area. That could be Sechelt or the Sunshine Coast. People do it provincially. Some people even do it nationally. So a big year for Canada or a big year for the United States. There's a movie, Jack Black and Owen Wilson and somebody else whose name I'm forgetting, called Big Year, which is actually a true story about 3 birders who go on these ridiculous, crazy big years. And that Xanthus's hummingbird that was in Gibson's is actually in that movie as well. Okay, so how to get more connected about learning about birds. On the Sunshine Coast, the Sunshine Coast Natural History Society is kind of the bird club of the Sunshine Coast. And that's their website there. You will get that emailed out to you as well. So they do monthly bird walks when possible in a non-pandemic world. And that's an excellent way to be able to learn birds because you're out in the field with other people who know what they're talking about. So I recommend you look them up. Their year runs October to May. And those monthly bird walks really are a great way to do that. So groups.io. So that is a email list group where you can learn more about birds. So that's kind of, I would say, the main kind of clubhouse on the Sunshine Coast. If you aren't on the Sunshine Coast, go to groups.io and search your region. I know there's one in Vancouver. There's one for Vancouver Island as well. And so that's an email list where you can email in your questions and have other people answer them. Just email in your sightings of what you've seen, or just watch what other people are reporting. If you're on Facebook, Wildlife Spotting on the Sunshine Coast is a brilliant website or a brilliant Facebook group where people post their sightings, not only of birds, but of all creatures. And you can also post your photo and ask your questions there. There's one, Birds of BC, as well. eBird and All About Birds we also went through. And of course, the Sunshine Coast Botanical Garden, which is doing their best to keep you as educated as possible about birds. And then a plug, we're going to do Q&A in a minute. So if you've got any questions, please start getting them into the Q&A module now. We've got upcoming webinars. Building a Resilient Garden is coming on April 5th. We're going to be learning about butterflies on May 12th, dragonflies on May 26th. There's going to be a growing cannabis workshop coming up. We still need to pin down the date for that. And then we'll be doing ongoing birding webinars if we've got any interest in that. And Coast Botanical Garden is where you can learn more about that as well. And so, of course, this event was sponsored by the Sunshine Coast Botanical Garden. You can visit them at coastbotanicalgarden.org. If you are interested in learning more about birds, we would love to have you in upcoming sessions that we're going to be doing that. And if you enjoyed this webinar, we ask that you go to coastbotanicalgarden.org and make a small donation. It could be as little as $10. We are going to be keeping an eye on who supported this webinar with a small donation, and we will return that support and making sure that you get priority access to upcoming events for the birding sessions with the Sunshine Coast Botanical Garden. So we've got some questions coming into the Q&A. I would love to see more coming in. If you've got them, now is the time. And if call notes vary, do they change when the bird moves elsewhere? I suspect that they do, actually. So that was the question. If call notes vary, do they change when the bird moves elsewhere? I would not think it would change when the bird moves other places, but a bird that migrates from California to Vancouver is going to have a different accent than a bird that migrates from California to the Arctic. And so that seems to be the difference that I'm seeing there in terms of how those vary. Hope that helped there. Jerry, how many birds on Neville's CD? I think 30 or 40. It's pretty complete. I found I didn't really get any gaps in what I was looking to look up when I used that to tune up my ears. So I don't even know where it is right now, to be honest. I can answer that in thorough detail. Yeah, I'm going to go 30 to 40, Jerry. Terry, what is the name of that bird that hammers on the tin flashing on your roof calling to its mate? That is the northern flicker. Without a doubt, that is the northern flicker. So northern flicker is one of our woodpeckers, and it will hammer on the metal flashing of your chimney because that's how it can get its song, which is the pecking. That hammering is a woodpecker's song. That's how it can get it to spread as long and as far as possible by using your chimney to do that. So northern flicker, they will get over it in a couple of weeks. So you just kind of grin and bear it. More questions coming. And again, if you can get your questions into the Q&A panel, that will be an easier place for me to be able to see it. Gail is asking if I played the Wingspan game. I've been learning quite a bit about birds from that. I don't know about the Wingspan game. I haven't played it. Gail, if you could get into the chat and make sure it's toggled to panelists and attendees and let us know where you access this Birdspan game, that would be great. When did you say the American goldfinch will be seen on the coast? Soon, So like second week, I'm picking up a guide. Second week of April, the American goldfinch will show up, and it will stay through to October. They, like most of our birds, they will be abundant as of May. And if the American goldfinch is a bird that you really want to see and you haven't seen it by the summer, contact the botanical garden, and I will personally help you out on that one. Any suggestions for places where one has the best chances of seeing an owl? Probably a barred owl. Yeah, barred owls are our most abundant birds. They like forest, dense forest. Think somewhere like Kinnickinnick Park. Being able to see one regularly and reliably is not so much a thing. So I would try denser forests when you're on your hikes and your walks, looking into the trees. I would say no more than 40 feet up, 50 feet up. They don't tend to roost high. They tend to be like down nearer the ground because they're usually looking for rodents and things like that. We do have barred owls at the botanical garden, and they do nest nearby. The southwest corner is kind of the best place where I've heard them in that area. So I hope that helps, Wendy. Do any of the field guides you recommend show the underside of the bird when flying? That's a great question. And actually both of these, Sibley's and National Geographic, they both have a bigger version that's more complete. So the Sibley's does show the underwing, like I'm looking at it now. So Sibley's, yeah, National Geographic probably will too. Yeah, so a North American field guide will show you that underwing detail. And Sibley's and the Nat Geo both have a larger version that has more detail about the underwing, comparing things like Cooper hawks with Sharpshin hawks, stuff like that. If you start getting granular, that's what these Sandpiper and Hawk books are about. But a good continent-wide field guide should give you the basic for that sort of information. Good birding spots on northern end of the Sunshine Coast before Earl's Cove. I would go to eBird and I would go to that hot spot. And then I would just move the map up into that region. So whatever region you're in, what part of the world you're in, you can go to eBird and go to those hot spots and try and track in on what's in your local area and what birding spots are around there. Bird baths, are they a good thing? Any extra info? I have one, but more general info would be useful. Bird baths are great. A bird bath, if you can put a rock in the middle of it, so it's not just the basin of it, that gives birds of varying different sizes the ability to use the bird bath. I would make sure that it's by some sort of shelter, hopefully some sort of shrubs in your garden as well. Make sure that it's being cleaned out on a regular basis. When it gets warmer, more algae and stuff like that will get in there. Keeping it a little bit, if you have a feeder, keeping it a little bit away from that, because if they're just like eating, then they'll just be eating and pooping and it's just becomes messy really quick. So I hope that helps. Could I have seen a broadwing hawk last week in South Vancouver near the endowment lands? It was there for over 20 minutes. Is it migrating? Broadwing hawk, yeah, that's definitely possible. That's a really tough bird on the Sunshine Coast, but down South Vancouver, that is very possible. And I don't know if they're migrating. So I would look into your guidebook or into All About Birds, look up the broadwing hawk on there, and guidebooks and All About Birds will give you range maps. So a range map will tell you where the bird is all of its year. It will tell you where it migrates into and just spends the summer there, and it will tell you where it winters. And so you'll be able to look up the broadwing hawk in there and get some better info. Can I attract tree swallows into my yard? We had them for almost 20 years and sadly haven't seen them for 3 years. Nesting boxes are up. Any ideas? I'm guessing that your garden has grown and it's more dense, it's more denser foliage around in your yard now than it was maybe 20 years ago. Swallows really like big sky. They like lots of room to move around. Nesting boxes are up. Nesting boxes, if things have grown up more, things like chickadees will move into the nesting boxes, that sort of thing. Otherwise, you can just try to grow mosquitoes because swallows love mosquitoes. That might help. Do I have a place to recommend for beginning bird watchers? So if you're on the Sunshine Coast, the Sechelt Marsh is a great place to start as a beginner. Few reasons for that. So you've got ducks on the marsh, and you've got dicky birds flying around, and then you have birds that are going to be at the end of Porpoise Bay as well. And chances are pretty good you might run into a bird watcher there. And it's a smaller patch that won't have as much variability. So take a look at eBird to see what other birders are seeing at the Sechelt Marsh, and then go from there. So if you are looking on somewhere like eBird at the hotspots, look at the places that are being visited frequently. Those are usually going to be birdie spots. Can you recommend a book for building birding nest boxes? No. So most of the nest boxes that I've put up at the Botanical Garden are based on a bluebird nest box. And if they are out near the open, near the big sky, swallows will use them. And if they are in denser forest areas, the chestnut-backed chickadees will use them, make beautiful, cozy little mossy nests in there. That's kind of a standard bird box that can be used on a lot of different areas. Bird boxes outside of that tend to be for wood ducks. So you'll see those actually on Trout Lake the other day. I just saw there was one in there, Sargent Bay. There's boxes for wood ducks or owl boxes. There's an owl box that you can see from the viewing platform at the Botanical Garden. Take a look for that on the other side and let us know if you see any action there. That would be great. Okay. I've heard some birds mate for life. Do all birds mate for life? No, not all birds mate for life. And so, in fact, some of them can be quite the frisky little creatures. So there are some little warblers and what have you where the female will mate with as many males as she can in order to ensure that she's got as much kind of gene pool going on. Other birds, like I think penguins, are known to mate for life. So no, they can be very variable. And yeah. So Kimberly said she heard an owl in October, but it was not a barred owl. It sounded like a great horned owl. Could you be right? Absolutely, you could be right. We have great horned owls here on the Sunshine Coast. And October would be a great time to hear them. It's got a slower, longer call to it. So owls, like any other birds, will have their differing sounds that they make, so you can differentiate them by ear. So look up the Great Horned Owl on All About Birds and take a listen to those songs there. And we do have them. October is the right time of the year. Which birds return every year to the same nest? I do not have enough knowledge to be able to answer that, Elizabeth. My apologies. I don't even know if any of them return to the same nest all the time. I would think that there's a lot going on in terms of you know, who could get into the nest or what have you. So I don't know. Maybe if you've got a nest in your backyard, keep an eye on it and see. Sheila's asking, bird feeders good or bad? I'm gonna go indifferent on this. So I don't have bird feeders myself. I will put bird feeders out if it's snowy. I'll put them out for hummingbirds, and I'll put out some seed for the little birds if I know they're going to struggle finding bird seed. But it's a great way to be able to see what's in your local area and to be able to learn more about birds and their behaviors. The one thing I will say is that if you are keeping a bird feeder, if it's hummingbird feeder or if it's just a regular seed feeder, keep it clean and be religious about keeping it clean. I would even go so far as to say you've got two so that you can take the time and diligence to properly clean it while the other one's out and then swap them and what have you. What do you know about the disease affecting pine siskins? It's like you two were in cahoots getting your questions in there. Is it still a big danger? So pine siskins are small little striped birds. If you see a ball of 100 birds flying around, that's probably pine siskins, and they have a big issue with salmonella. And it is still an ongoing issue. A lot of people don't have their feeders up right now because of that. So if you are keeping your bird feeder out there and you've got siskins around, just make sure that like it's a daily cleaning kind of a thing, because they come to the one spot and then they transmit it bird to bird to bird. Are bird feeders right to put out again? I think the main answer there is a very personal choice, but if you are doing that, just make sure it's being kept clean. Have red-winged blackbirds returned yet? Red-winged blackbirds are actually with us all year round. So if you're at the Seashell Marsh or Sergeant Bay, you will be able to hear them all year round, but yes, they are getting louder. So if you're a blackbird fan, get out there near your nearest marsh, because I assure you they are there and they want to see you. Have cowbirds in our yard over the last few years. How can we discourage them? So cowbirds lay their eggs in other birds' nests. So you'll get some little tiny warbler raising a great big cowbird chick. How can you discourage them? I don't think you can, to be honest. It's nature is nature, and if it's the right habitat for them to be there, then I think that they're going to be there. But if you do learn anything about that, by all means, do share it with us. But we just kind of have to let nature take its course, and that's part of it, unfortunately. Do we have chestnut-backed chickadees on the Sunshine Coast? Yes, we do have chestnut-backed chickadees on the Sunshine Coast. They're actually our main chickadee. You can find them anywhere on the Sunshine Coast, usually in groups, often with golden crown kinglets and ruby crown kinglets. Black-headed chickadee is a difficult bird on the coast. You can sometimes get them down to Gibsons. But yeah, we do have black chestnut-backed chickadees. Okay, there were some questions that did not get into the Q&A. We got red-breasted sapsuckers also hammering on drain pipes as well. Again, it's the hummingbird thing, right? And then we've got Wingspan. That's the game. It's that's at local game store, so it's an actual physical game. That's great. Cliff Gilker's good spot for owls. And Harry says there's been a pair of barred owls calling near the botanical garden in the past week. Yeah, and the barred owls at the garden will definitely call overnight. And do we have a photo of the hummingbird about to arrive soon? Look up Rufus hummingbird versus the Anna's hummingbird. Those are our birds on the Sunshine Coast, hummingbirds on the Sunshine Coast. So I think that's it. I've taken up enough of your time. We're about an hour 15 now. Can't thank you enough for joining us, for being here. If you have a moment to make a small donation, coastbotanicalgarden.org, then we will make sure that you're the first to know about any birding events that we have coming up, and we'd love to do more. Certainly seems to be interest about that. Otherwise, please go to the garden, do the bird challenge, try and find as many of those birds as you can, and let us know when you have. Thank you all so much for being here, and we hope to see you at the next webinar, which is on next Monday about resilient gardens. Thanks very much, everyone. See you next time.